Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we are continuing our study of three Marys: Mary of Nazareth, Mary of Bethany, and Mary of Magdala, and their relationships with Jesus. We're talking about Mary, the mother of Jesus, and we're still in that early event of the birth of Jesus, and we're in Matthew chapter 2, and the entire chapter is devoted to the episode of the visit of the Magi and the flight to Egypt. Um, and so, anyway, let's just read the chapter. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." And when Herod the king heard it, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And gathering together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he began to inquire of them where the Christ was to be born. And they said, they knew the right answer. They knew the right answer. Bethlehem of Judea, for it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem of Judea, this is Micah chapter 5, by the way, Bethlehem of Judea are by no means least among the leaders of Judah, for out of you shall come forth a ruler who will shepherd my people. Then Herod secretly called the Magi, ascertained the time the star appeared, and he said to Bethlehem, and he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make careful search for the child. When you found him, report to me, that I too may come and worship him." And having heard the king, they went their way. And lo, the star which they had seen in the east went on before them until it came and stood over where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And they came to the house and saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. And opening their treasures, they presented to him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed for their own country by another way. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, "Arise, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him." And he arose and took the child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that what was spoken of the Lord through the prophet might be fulfilled. "Out of Egypt I called my son." That's Hosea, by the way, chapter 11, verse 1. And so we know about Herod being angry and killing the children 2 years and younger in Bethlehem, and that fulfilling a prophecy in Jeremiah 31. Rachel weeping for her children, because Rachel's buried there, by the way. Rachel is buried in Bethlehem, um, and um, and so they go to Egypt. And we're told in 19, when Herod was dead, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, "Arise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead." And he arose and took the child and his mother and came to the land of Israel. And when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father, Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned by God in a dream, he departed for the regions of Galilee, came and resided in a city called Nazareth, that what was spoken through the prophet might be fulfilled: "He shall be called a Nazarene." That's an interesting connection in verse 23, because the word Nazar means branch. And so Nazareth is literally the city of branches. And Nazarot, it's branches in its plural form. That's the name of the town, is Branches. And so um, that prophecy is repeated not only in Isaiah but in Zechariah as well. Um, and and so Matthew is the one who's careful to point out how Jesus fulfills every prophecy ever made about the Messiah, and he does that several times here in this chapter. And we're not going to go over all of those because that's not our topic. We want to talk about Mary. Um, um, there was a large Jewish population in Egypt, in Alexandria, where honestly the best minds in Judaism were staying and writing and studying. Philo of Alexandria is probably the greatest philosopher scholar that Judaism has ever produced. And that's including all the great Jewish philosophers of the 18th, 19th, 21st, 20th, and 21st centuries. And he's living at then, right then. He doesn't die until 88, um, 8 AD, I should say, to make it clear. So he's alive when they go to Egypt. But up and down the Nile River, there are Jewish communities. Some of them are large, and we have their letters. And so when they went to Egypt, they would have found lots of Jews to live among. A lot of details to think about in this passage. The wise men came from the east. They are coming from present day Iran. They are, you know, from ancient Babylon. They are from ancient Persia. And the scholars and the thinkers and the priests from that time on have been watchers of the night sky and would keep meticulous notes of the positions of the stars. And it's hard to distinguish between whether they were astrologers or astronomers because they were both. They really were the first true astronomers in keeping track of the movements of the planets and the stars in the universe. And but they're also astrologers because they see meaning in it. And because of that, they follow a star that's leading them to Jesus. There's been a lot of scholarship done trying to figure out what phenomenon in the ancient world do we know about that this could be. And there are some compelling examples. You can look those up. There's one from about 7 BC where there was a series of convergences in the night sky of the planets Jupiter and Mars, I think, which would have made them look like a very bright star. And it hasn't been repeated since then. And maybe it was that. It's miraculous because it locates the very house they're staying in. Okay? So I don't know that we can find what it is. Arthur C. Clarke wrote a famous short story, you know, about the identity of the star and it being a particular supernova that God had prepared. But whatever it is, it's miraculous. And it leads them to the very house they're staying in, and they are staying in a house. Herod is one of the great villains of history, and also one of the great builders of history, and one of the great politicians of history. I don't know that there's a more Machiavellian leader. I mean, he gets A+ from Niccolo Machiavelli if they'd ever crossed paths, because he was always on the winning side of everything. And he murdered two of his own children, two of his own sons, when he thought they were getting too powerful. So he's not going to hesitate to murder, you know, a whole village full of infants. He's just not. And he wants to kill the Christ child because he is the Christ child. Can we get the hubris of that? And and the fact that the scholars knew exactly where the Messiah was to be born. They know the answers. That's something we get in the Gospels as well. There's no excuse for the Jews rejecting Jesus because they knew exactly what the word said. They knew that he said he was going to raise on the third day. Matthew's Gospel tells us this. The disciples didn't get it, but they knew that he'd said that. And there's no excuse for them. And they're staying in a house. That's another thing. They're staying in a house at this point. Someone has given them hospitality um, after the birth of their infant son. And they find him in a house. They give him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Frankincense and myrrh are both more precious by weight than gold. These aromatic, perfumed spices um, that they were given. In other words, they're given liquid assets. They can hold in a box about this size enough money to get them to Egypt, to get them established in Egypt, and to see them through until they come back. That's what they're given. God gives them disposable income in the very moment that they need it to go to Egypt. And go to Egypt they do, and they stay until they know that Herod is dead. And then they go back to Nazareth. They were thinking not to go to Nazareth, but then they do. They go back home. They go back to her home. They go back to Nazareth, his home too, evidently, at some point, because their paths crossed and they were engaged to each other before any of this ever came about. So that's where they go. And that's where we find them next time. Thank you for joining me for another 10 good minutes with the Word.